AITA for refusing to pay for my sister's college after she threw my toddler. I'm so angry, frustrated, and hurt that I feel like I'm about to explode. Everyone in my life is acting like I'm overreacting, but I genuinely feel like I've been patient and understanding for months, and now I've hit my breaking point. I've replayed what happened over and over in my head, and no matter how I frame it, I don't think I'm in the wrong here. But I need an outside perspective because I feel like I'm losing my grip on reality. For some context, I'm 34 female, married, and have a 22-month-old son who's basically the light of my life. He's curious, energetic, and loves to explore, which is both adorable and exhausting. Like most toddlers, he's at the stage where he wants to be involved in everything I do, but he doesn't understand boundaries yet. If I'm cooking, he's clinging to my legs. If I'm cleaning, he wants to be picked up. It's sweet, but it can also be dangerous when I'm handling something hot or sharp. He's just being a toddler, but anyone who has kids knows how intense this stage can be. My younger sister, 19 female, has been living with us since the start of the semester. She's attending college nearby, and my husband and I offered to let her stay with us rent-free. We also agreed to cover her tuition, food, and pretty much all her living expenses. My parents aren't in a financial position to help her like this, and I know how much of a difference having that support made for me when I was in school. My husband and I are fortunate to be in a position where we can help, so we stepped up. The arrangement seemed to work for everyone. Now, I'll admit my sister is young, and like most 19-year-olds, she's a little self-centered at times. She spends a lot of time on her phone or hanging out with friends, but she's not a bad kid. She gets along well with my son, and they adore each other. Because of that, I've occasionally asked her to help me watch him. It's never for long, usually 15 to 20 minutes while I cook or clean, and at most an hour if I need to run a quick errand. I always ask her first, and if she says she's busy, I let it go. I've never forced her to babysit, and when she does help, I usually pay her $10.15, even though we're already covering everything else for her. She's never complained and has even said she doesn't mind watching him when I ask. There is, however, one rule I've been very firm about: no jewelry or accessories when you're around my son. He has a bad habit of pulling on necklaces, earrings, headbands, you name it. We're working on teaching him not to do that, but he's still too little to fully understand, and scolding him usually just makes him giggle. Until we can curb this behavior, I've made it clear that anyone watching him needs to avoid wearing anything he can grab. It's not a difficult rule, and my sister has always said she understands. 2 days ago, I had to run a quick errand. My son was napping at the time, and since I didn't want to leave him alone, I asked my 19-year-old sister if she could watch him for a little while. She's been around him plenty of times, so I thought she'd be fine for the short time I'd be gone. I explained that I wouldn't be longer than 20 minutes, and she agreed without hesitation. As I was getting ready to leave, I noticed she was wearing one of those thin plastic headbands with the little comb-like teeth inside. You know, the kind that can easily dig into your scalp if it's on too tight. I've always been very cautious about items like that around my son because of his sensory sensitivities and the way he sometimes reacts to certain textures or objects. Before heading out, I reminded her of the rule. If my son woke up, she needed to remove the headband immediately and put it somewhere out of reach. It wasn't a new rule. She'd heard it before and knew why it was important. But instead of taking it seriously, she rolled her eyes and muttered something like, "If he wakes up, I'll take it off." Her tone was dismissive, but I let it slide because I figured she understood the stakes. I trusted her to handle such a simple request after all. She's 19, not a child. I didn't want to micromanage or make a big deal out of it, especially since it was only supposed to be 20 minutes. With that, I left, confident she could handle the situation. When I got back right on time, I immediately sensed something was wrong. As I pulled into the driveway, I heard screaming from inside the house. At first, I thought my son might be having a tantrum, which happens occasionally, but then I realized it wasn't just him. I could hear my sister shouting too. Her voice was loud and panicked, cutting through the noise in a way that made my stomach drop. My heart started pounding as I rushed to the door, fumbling with the keys in my panic. I wasn't prepared for what I saw when I stepped inside. The scene was utter chaos. My sister was sitting on the couch, her face pale, clutching her ear as blood dripped down her neck and onto her shirt. She looked terrified and furious at the same time, tears streaming down her face as she yelled, "He hurt me! He hurt me!" over and over again. On the floor, my son was curled up, screaming and sobbing so hard that he could barely catch his breath. His cries were raw, the kind that come from a place of pure pain and fear. My gaze darted between them, trying to make sense of what had happened. Then, I noticed the blood on my son's head. His hair was matted, and there was a deep, ugly gash on his scalp that made my stomach twist. For a moment, I was paralyzed, caught between my instinct to check on him and the sheer shock of seeing so much blood. My sister's voice was a constant background noise, shouting about how he'd hurt her, but I couldn't focus on her words. All I could think about was my son, the panic in his eyes, and the way his tiny hands were gripping his head as he wailed. I dropped everything and ran to him, kneeling on the floor as I tried to calm him enough to check his injuries. Blood was seeping through his hair and staining my hands as I gently moved his hands away to get a better look. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with questions and guilt as I tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong in just 20 minutes. I didn't care about anything else in that moment except getting my son help. I called 911 and told them there had been an accident. While we waited for the paramedics, I tried to calm my son down, but he was inconsolable. My sister just sat there, still holding her ear and crying. I wanted to scream at her, but I couldn't even form a coherent thought. All I could think about was my son. At the hospital, we pieced together what had happened. My son woke up shortly after I left, and my sister brought him to the living room to play. At some point, she got distracted by her phone and wasn't paying attention when he reached up and grabbed her headband. He pulled it off her head and, in his curiosity, stuck it into her ear. The headband punctured her eardrum, causing her to scream in pain. In her panic, she threw him off of her, literally threw him to get him away from her. He landed hard on the floor, hitting his head on the hardwood. My son ended up with a concussion and needed stitches for the cut on his head. My sister's eardrum was severely damaged, and the doctors said she might never regain full hearing in that ear. We paid for all her medical bills, of course, but I was and still am absolutely furious with her. Yes, I understand she was hurt and scared. But who reacts like that to a toddler? He's a baby. He doesn't understand that he hurt you. She knew his tendencies. She knew not to wear accessories around him. And if she couldn't handle the situation, she could have called me or even just put the headband out of reach like she said she would. Instead, she ignored my rule, got distracted, and then reacted violently when something went wrong. When we got home, I told her she needed to move out. I didn't yell or lose my temper, but I was firm. I also told her that after this semester, we would no longer be paying for her tuition or other expenses. My husband fully supports my decision. We've been bending over backward to help her, and the only thing I've ever asked in return was to occasionally help out with my son and keep him safe. She failed to do that in the worst way possible. Now, my family is acting like I'm the villain. My parents think I'm being too harsh and that I should forgive her because it was an accident. They've even said I shouldn't have trusted her with my son in the first place because he's not her responsibility. But if she didn't want to help, she could have just said no. She's an adult, she had a choice, and she agreed to watch him. I'm not expecting her to be a full-time nanny. I'm just asking for basic common sense. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for asking her to move out and cutting off her tuition? Everyone around me seems to think I'm overreacting, but I feel like I'm just holding her accountable for something that could have been avoided if she'd listened to me in the first place. Update 1. Now that I've had a bit of time to calm down and reflect, I want to clarify a few things that might help provide more context. I realize I was writing in the heat of the moment, and my emotions were clouding my ability to give a full picture of the situation. I still stand by my decision to ask my sister to move out, but I also want to address some of the comments and questions people have raised. First, about the financial arrangement. My husband and I were only planning to pay for the first 2 years of my sister's schooling. This was something my parents did for me when I was in college, and it was always intended to be a temporary form of support to help her get on her feet. Covering all 5 years of her schooling was never on the table. It simply wouldn't be feasible for us financially, and that was understood from the beginning. The idea was that after those 2 years, she would either take out loans, apply for scholarships, or work part-time to cover the rest. I know some people might find that arrangement unusual, but it's what worked for our family, and I wanted to help her get through those crucial early years without the added stress of juggling school and a job. Regarding food and rent, these were things that didn't really add much to our expenses. I already cook in large batches because it's easier for me to meal prep for my family, and adding one more person to the dinner table didn't feel like a huge deal. Rent was also a non-issue since we have a guest room that was sitting empty. As long as she kept her space tidy and cleaned up after herself, it wasn't a burden for us to let her stay. I know it might sound like I went out of my way to pamper her, but at the time, it felt like the right thing to do. She's my sister, and I wanted to give her the best chance at success. Now, about paying her to babysit. This wasn't something I was obligated to do, but it was something I chose to do because I understand how demanding college can be. My sister's coursework is intense and requires a lot of focus and energy. While I never expected her to be a live-in nanny or take on a significant caregiving role, I felt it was only fair to compensate her when she watched my son for longer than 15 minutes. My husband is very particular about keeping our house tidy, so I often need time to deep clean or organize while also managing our toddler. Offering her $15 here and there felt like a win-win. She got some extra spending money, and I got a little relief. Again, this was never something I demanded of her, and if she ever said she wasn't up for it, I didn't push. To address some common questions about discipline, yes, we do discipline our son. When he does something wrong, we redirect him, explain why it's wrong, and take away whatever he's throwing or playing with inappropriately. He's not just running wild without consequences, but he's also a toddler, so his understanding of boundaries is limited. We don't believe in spanking or any form of physical punishment, and that's a line my husband and I have both agreed not to cross. We're doing our best to teach him right from wrong in an age-appropriate way, but he's still learning. This is one of those stages where patience is key, and we're working through it. As for the injuries, I'm grateful to say that the doctors were optimistic about both my son and my sister. My sister's eardrum, thankfully, only suffered a minor tear, and they expect it to heal within 2 to 3 months. She may experience some temporary hearing loss, but the damage isn't permanent. My son's concussion was mild, and his cut required a few stitches, but they assured us he would recover fully within the next 4 weeks. Knowing that both of them will heal physically has been a huge relief, but it hasn't erased the emotional weight of what happened. Since the incident, I haven't spoken to my sister directly. The last conversation we had was when I told her she needed to move out, and I haven't felt ready to revisit that yet. According to my parents, she's been extremely remorseful and feels horrible about what happened. They've told me she's been crying nonstop and keeps saying how sorry she is. I don't doubt that she feels bad. I know my sister well enough to believe that she's genuinely upset, but right now, I'm not in a place where I can talk to her without my anger bubbling to the surface. I need more time to process everything before I can have a calm, constructive conversation with her. My parents have been pushing for us to reconcile, but I don't think they fully understand how deeply this incident has affected me. Yes, my sister's injuries are serious, and I feel awful that she's going through this, but my son is my priority. Seeing him hurt, bleeding, and scared out of his mind was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. I can't just brush that aside and pretend everything is okay. I need time to heal from this too, and right now, the best thing for me is space. To be honest, I'm still struggling with a mix of emotions. Part of me feels guilty for being so harsh with my sister, especially knowing that she's young and probably didn't know how to handle the situation. But another part of me is still furious that this happened in the first place. I trusted her to watch my son for 20 minutes. I gave her clear instructions about the headband, and instead of being proactive, she ignored my warnings, got distracted by her phone, and panicked when things went wrong. I can't just sweep that under the rug and act like it's no big deal. I hope we can find a way to move forward eventually, but it's going to take time. For now, I'm focusing on my son's recovery and trying to restore some sense of normalcy in our home. This whole situation has been a nightmare, and I just want to put it behind me as much as possible. If there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that setting boundaries even with family is crucial. I thought I was being generous and supportive by letting my sister live with us and covering her expenses, but maybe I didn't set clear enough expectations from the start. I don't regret helping her, but I do regret not addressing some of these issues earlier. If nothing else, I hope this experience will be a wake-up call for both of us. Update 2. It's been a few months since the incident, and while it was one of the most emotionally exhausting periods of my life, I can finally say that things have settled down. Everyone has reconciled, we've all had time to process and reflect, and the relationships that felt so strained and fragile are slowly rebuilding. It wasn't an overnight process, and it required a lot of conversations, apologies, and healing on all sides, but I think we've come out of this stronger. After a few weeks of no contact with my sister, I finally felt ready to talk to her. During that time, I had focused entirely on my son's recovery and making sure he was okay. Thankfully, his stitches healed quickly, and by the time a month had passed, you wouldn't have known he'd been injured at all. He was back to his usual happy, curious self, running around the house and chattering away in his toddler babble. The doctors confirmed that his concussion was mild and that there wouldn't be any lasting effects, which was an enormous relief. Seeing him fully recovered allowed me to let go of some of the anger and fear I had been holding on to. My sister's recovery also went well. Her eardrum healed within the time frame the doctors predicted, and she regained full hearing in that ear. My parents kept me updated during the weeks we weren't speaking, and while I wasn't ready to talk to her at the time, I did appreciate knowing she was okay. They told me how remorseful she had been, how she cried every time she thought about what happened, and how much she wished she could take it back. I knew they were trying to mediate and pave the way for us to reconcile, but I wasn't ready yet. When I finally reached out to her, it wasn't an easy conversation. I was still hurt and still had a lot of unresolved feelings about what had happened, but I also knew I couldn't hold on to that anger forever. She was my sister, and despite everything, I loved her. When we talked, I could tell how deeply sorry she was. She owned up to her mistakes, ignoring my warnings about the headband, getting distracted by her phone, and panicking in the moment. She didn't try to make excuses or downplay what had happened, and hearing her take full responsibility made it easier for me to start forgiving her. We also talked about the expectations I had set when she moved in. Looking back, I realized that while I thought I had been clear about the boundaries and rules, there were some things I could have communicated better. I assumed she understood the seriousness of watching a toddler and the importance of following my instructions, but I hadn't explicitly laid out what I expected in certain scenarios. I think she genuinely didn't realize how much responsibility came with those moments of babysitting, and while that doesn't excuse what happened, it gave me some perspective on how we both could have handled things differently. My parents were also instrumental in helping us move forward. They acknowledged that they had initially been too quick to defend her and dismiss my feelings, and they apologized for making me feel like I was overreacting. They admitted they didn't fully understand the severity of the situation at first and were just trying to protect both of their daughters. Once they saw how serious the injuries were, both my son's and my sister's, they realized they had been wrong to minimize what happened. That apology meant a lot to me and helped ease some of the tension between us. After those initial conversations, my sister and I started rebuilding our relationship slowly. She moved back home with my parents after leaving our house, which gave us both the space we needed. We continued talking, but this time, the focus was on understanding each other better and setting healthier boundaries. My sister even took it upon herself to research toddler safety and behavior, which showed me how much she wanted to make amends. She told me she realized she had been careless and that the incident was a wake-up call for her in more ways than one. Over time, I came to realize that my sister wasn't the only one who needed to grow from this experience. I also learned a lot about myself and how I handle conflict, especially with family. I had been so focused on providing for her and making her life easier that I hadn't stopped to think about whether I was enabling her to stay in a place of immaturity. By paying for everything and asking so little in return, I had unintentionally created an imbalance in our relationship. I wanted to support her, but I had to recognize that support doesn't mean shielding someone from all responsibility. Eventually, we found a way to move forward that worked for everyone. My sister and I agreed that she would continue living with my parents while she finished her degree. They stepped in to cover the financial support we had been providing, and she also started working part-time to contribute to her expenses. This arrangement allowed her to take more ownership of her life while still having a safety net, and it lifted a huge burden off of me and my husband. I think the shift in responsibility was good for her. It gave her a sense of independence and accountability that she hadn't had before. As for my son, he's completely recovered and blissfully unaware of the chaos that unfolded around him. He still adores his aunt, and seeing how much she loves him back has been a big part of why I've been able to let go of the resentment I felt. She's been more careful and attentive around him since the incident, and while I haven't asked her to babysit again, I do trust her to be a positive presence in his life moving forward. The healing process wasn't easy, and it took time, but I'm glad we all worked through it. My relationship with my sister feels stronger now because we've had those hard conversations and come out the other side. My parents and I are also on better terms, and I think they've gained a new understanding of what it means to support both of their daughters without taking sides or diminishing anyone's feelings.